Autism sprinter. Think equity. Yeah. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, yeah, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism sprinter. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. Yes, it gotta be equal. It gotta be right.
Good evening, mi gente. How are you? My name is Jahida Lopez, the founder of Autism Sprinter, and today is super excited. As you guys know, I consider myself a mom that kids. So when I meet other moms that are super mom that kids too, I'm like, oh, can we just give a hug? This is meant to be. Let's mom that kid together. So today we are gonna join in a conversation with Lisa Drennan, who is the founder of Merge, and she works on supporting careers with those for individuals that have intellectual and developmental disabilities, and training businesses and organizations to be inclusive, right? So I can't tell you what she does. She has to tell you what she does. So I'm going to bring her on, and I'm super duper excited because, again, moms are out here rocking the work, you guys. Like, it's unbelievable. Hey.
Hi. Hey, Mom.
Hey, Mom. How are you?
Great. Super.
So, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, so glad to be here. My name is Lisa Drennan, and I am the founder of Merge Disabilities Inclusion Consulting. So I'll share a little bit about my background and what brings me to Merge and what is the work that I do with Merge. So I started working in the field of supporting adults with developmental disabilities when I was 17 years old. So 30 years I worked at a place called New England Village, and it's in Pembroke, Mass. It's a residential community. And there I learned everything about advocating and listening, right? And working with families. Recreation was a big part of my role there. I really loved the time that I spent offering recreation opportunities because I could see people come alive, right? When they were doing something that they loved. And, after 30 years there, I went over to the South Shore YMCA as their first ever association director of inclusion. So now my whole world's, kind of like, had a flip-flop. So I came from working with people who were all committed to working with this population, right? And helping them to have meaningful lives and participation in our communities and so on and so forth. And then I go to the Y where I'm working with, what I would call like the rest of the world, right? So with staff at the YMCA, and I'm teaching them how to be inclusive, how to work with this population, and how to welcome them and engage them and support them. So I'm working with people who maybe didn't have a background, right? So maybe it's a lifeguard, right, who works on the weekends, or it's somebody who works a membership desk, a camp counselor, a fitness instructor. So people who are providing a service for the entire community, right, for our community, and I'm teaching them how to welcome, support, and engage our members with diverse abilities. And so I use that term, I like to clarify. It really encompasses all the different ways that a person can interact, learn, or, learn about the world around them, participate. So it could, be physical disability, developmental, intellectual, social, emotional issues, substance abuse, whatever it is that a person is, if it changes, alters the way that they participate. That's why I use the word diverse abilities, kind of captures it all. So while at the Y, my big aha moment came that the rest of the world needs this. I had spent 30 years really trying to help individuals, folks, adults at the time, to get out into the community, be welcomed and engaged in our community. And I just always felt like I was on a treadmill, right? Try to get out and work with this program or that program or church or library or what have you. And often it was successful for a little bit, maybe not so successful. I felt like when I went to the Y, my aha moment is that people want to do better in engaging and welcoming this community, but they don't know how. So that was my, moment that if we don't work to help educate and provide the tools and the resources to the rest of the community, right, then we're always going to be running on a treadmill, it felt like. So that's what made me start Merge. I had the opportunity at the Y to work with YUSA, and I ran a resource group for Ys across the country. And I would get calls from, somebody from Wichita or, Texas or wherever, Florida, and saying, hey, we have this issue, or we're trying to start this program or whatnot. And I could answer it like off the top of my head, just no issues at all. And it made me think, I love doing this. I love helping these. I love when I get these phone calls because I can sit down and break down my 30 years of experience plus all my Y experience. And I can answer questions and I can help guide people to how they can become more inclusive. So that made me want to do this more, right? So I started Merge in 2018, March 2018. And I work primarily with recreation, sport, camp, any community organization that is offering something for our general community and teaching them how to be more inclusive of in their practices. Mm-hmm. I also, on the flip side, go back to agencies or programs that support people with disabilities, and I help them to learn about authentic inclusion within their community, and how, whether you're a parent or a direct support provider, an aide, a para, whomever you are working in this field to support somebody with a diverse ability, that I help to provide training, consultation for that population as well, to from the other end, right? We have to be working from both sides. It's like we have the community and people supporting people with disabilities, and there's been just too much of this, for too long. We need to work collaboratively. So there's like a bridge, and we're just walking back and forth on that bridge and strengthening that bridge together. So that's what brings me to today. Yeah, 3 years in.
Yes, and I can see the sparks and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Right? So
this is it.
I love the fact that you're saying, before we got on, you said something that I'm like, I love that. Part of what you do is you listen, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes parents like myself feel like no one's listening. It feels like we're giving suggestions, we're giving ideas to whether it's, the SPED packs, the parent-teacher conferences, or we're giving, but it just feels like no one's listening. So can you tell us why promoting inclusion in these camps, in the school culture, we also need a lot of our local businesses to adapt into this, right? Can you tell us why inclusion is so important to building a stronger community?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, 1 in 5 people have or will have a disability at some point in their lives. That's 20% of our community. And not only that, that's for every person out there, there's a parent and a sibling and family who are also affected when their child or family member is not included, right? So that's a huge part of our community. And we have a responsibility. This is, communities are stronger when we're all welcomed, right? When everybody is welcomed, we're going to be stronger. So I think, why is it so important? I think, simply that all belong. Everybody should belong in our communities, in participating in ways. I'm just, I always feel like and I grew up with this, and I worked in a community where, the individuals lived over here and the rest of the world lived over here. And you see special ed, there's kids over here, and then the rest of the kids over here, and special this and special that. And I just feel that we can do better. There is a place for that, but I think that we need to push those boundaries and open up our doors for all types of inclusion in all types of settings. I think too, there's so many benefits, right? And now working in the field, working in the field forever, but really having this focus, you can't even believe all the benefits that come from when an organization or camp or a program puts more effort and is intentional about their work to become more inclusive. I mean, think about, the camp staff, for instance, the benefits, what they will learn when they get over the barriers and the hurdles that are there, right? The organization as a whole, when you commit to this, you're serving your community. And that's so important. And I think for a lot of the organizations that we may be thinking about when we want to have our child participate in camp or programs, it's part of their mission, right, is to serve their community. And I think that you serve your community best when the membership of your organization is a representation of your community, right? So, and that includes people with diverse abilities. So I think when we focus on all the benefits, it becomes really important of why inclusion is so important in our communities, why we should be thinking more inclusively. And in every aspect of our communities, right? And I focus more on the recreation and enrichment and wellness and all those areas, but every part of our community.
But those are the most important parts, I think, for most families, right? Because, I'm a mom of two. My kids are going to be 11. So recreation is big, right? I got to get these kids out the house. They need to get out the house. They need to run. And I got to find an agency or a camp that understands their needs, because one of my sons is
Absolutely.
and my other son has ADHD. So, we need to have someone who truly understands and has a lot of patience, right? Because, these children are different. They require different tones. They require different level of engagement. And so this work that you're doing is super duper important. So how do we measure inclusion, right? With what's happening in this pandemic, right? So as we've seen that during this pandemic, one of the first few things that happened in this pandemic was that a lot of families, seeing this thing that went on social media where the government was like, hey, school districts can't really offer the services right now. So many parents got upset, and we're like, why is our children being left behind? Our children weren't taught to use the computers or laptops. This is like new to us. How do we measure inclusion in this digital world, in this technology world?
It is, and when you think of recreation, it's even a harder call of action there. But when I think of measuring inclusion during these times specifically, and it just reminded me when last year at this time, March, April, what have you, when I pretty much I felt like, oh my goodness, my whole entire business is just gone, right? Because everything I do is live presentations and attending conferences and doing trainings and whatnot. And what hit me the hardest in the heart was that, I would still be hearing from families or seeing posts or whatnot about, I'm at home with my child and they need help and they need services and we have nothing. And my heart was just like broken, it was like, what's going on here? And I became really fearful because this is generally the time of year where we really start to plan for camp, right? This is March, it starts in February, March, April, whatnot. And I just said, inclusion can't be canceled. And it just dawned on me like, that's it, right? Inclusion is not canceled. So I came up with an entire, kind of series of webinars and thinking and just that kind of hashtag, inclusion is not canceled. Especially in recreation, it's needed, and all the trainings that I did, of course, a lot got canceled last year, but those that did, still stay on board and were offering camp, my statement was, now more than ever, these families need us. These kids need this interaction. And what's really important in these times is that, people with disabilities, particularly kids with disabilities as well, they experience isolation and loneliness at a much higher degree than your neurotypical kids or adults, right? In adulthood too. Think about that. That people with disabilities are more lonely. They're more isolated. That's why recreation is so important, because that's where connections happen. Recreation is probably, I don't know, I don't want to, say anything bad about schools, but I think there's more opportunity for growth in recreation than there could perhaps be in school, because that's when somebody's doing what they love, right? And that's where they're going to be sitting next to somebody who, oh, you like this too? And then maybe a friendship develops, right? That's where someone can shine, and the focus can be not on their disability and a measurement of, well, you're not reading at this level or this or that, but oh, you're really good at drawing. Oh, you really like playing soccer, or whatever it is that they love. Oh, look at that, what you just made in robotics. That's what recreation is about. So how do we measure it right now? Oh, I really wish I had a good answer for that, because it's not functioning the way it should be. Our life isn't functioning the way it should be right now. But when we do measure, I think that this is the one thing that we want to be mindful of, is that meaningful participation is occurring, right? That not just kind of a physical proximity, or, well, they jumped on, they jumped on the Zoom call for an hour, or what have you, but that it's not about just being there. It's about meaningfully participating and still having that individualized goals being met, so that's where we want to measure. We want to think about, that intentional work that we're doing to know that this child right here, to know them and to help them to reach their goals. It takes a lot more, especially online. I mean, it is a struggle, and we're all learning this together. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I do listen to a lot of programs that, what are they doing remotely? How are they engaging their, participants? And what do we know? What have we learned so far in the past year that we can share, so that these kids and teens and adults are participating in ways that are meaningful, right? It's not just proximity. It's participating together and are part of the group and not separate. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer right now, but I hopefully got a little bit of justice there.
No, but it's real. We're having a real conversation, right? We are in a whole different world, where this virtual world may not be a thing for children with unique abilities, right? Our kids are not used to sitting in front of a laptop for hours a day without any social interaction, because like you said, a part of a lot of this work that you're doing to build inclusion requires body to body. It's like people next to people, and building on the social skills. So it's been interesting. My son is kind of tapped out. I don't, I'm constantly like, hey, turn on the camera. Hey, a text message from the teacher, like, hey, on YouTube, and I'm like,
right, yeah. Exactly. It's the good news is that from what I hear and a lot of the responses I'm getting back and the feedback that I'm hearing out in the camp world and recreation worlds, and being involved in a lot of conferences recently, and that the buzz is that it'll be more and more opened and available this summer. And I think that a lot of kinks were worked out last summer. It was like, how are we going to do this? The kids at mass and 6 feet apart and all this. And, the thought of, and luckily, hopefully we learned that it can work. And then I want our camps to just kind of go that one step further, remind themselves inclusion is not canceled. Now more than ever is why we need to be focused on inclusion. So right now is the time. So if you're over in the camps who are, wanting to figure out, well, how do we do this summer? It's really no different in ways. And what I discovered last year during my camp trainings was that all the strategies that I was teaching the year before and the year before and the year before, about creating a culture of inclusion, being flexible and thinking outside the box and making accommodations, weren't they all the strategies that we all needed to make this COVID thing work? So it's like, it really, it was pretty remarkable to think about all the ways that an inclusive mind thinks is what is going to help this world get out of this COVID in a way that we're all successfully participating. Strange. So, maybe full circle, and maybe it'll help, because now we've figured out that we can make things happen, right? And even the most disastrous situations like we're in now, we can make camp happen. We can make a rec program happen. We just have to be creative, and we have to be flexible in our thinking, and we have to make room for accommodations and modifications. That's all I ask for people for inclusion. That's it. Oh,
yes. Hashtag that, mi gente, creative inclusion.
Yeah.
Exactly. As you know, a lot of the work I do is around racial equity. As a woman of color, right? When I was trying to navigate resources and gain access to, supports for my children, it was different for me, right? So how do we measure not only disability and inclusion, right? But how do we put a spin to the racial part of inclusion, right? Because we know that many of our families that we serve may not be from this country, right? So, families may not speak English.
Correct.
And,
could have different cultural backgrounds that we need to understand so that we can then, help that child to be successful. So one thing that I say is, when I think about inclusion, and we look at that, it dimensions of diversity, right? So it's this big wheel of the different ways we can be different. And it could be, race, religion, sexual identity, age, social, economic, all these different pieces of the pie, right? And I specialize in this one little slice, abilities, right? In that level. And, but what I say is that the same philosophies, the same mindset, the same strategies, the same approaches that I would share with a camp seeking to be more inclusive of blank kids with disabilities, the same approaches could be used. Just take out kids with disabilities and put in, cultural diversity or racial diversity, or, wherever the focus needs to be. The bottom line is, if your community, you want to represent your community. And if you've got a camp and you're looking around and everybody's white, but you live in an area that geographically not everybody's white, why are you not reaching those other kids, right? And, I believe studies show that kids with diverse abilities, and then you put on that, additional, whether it's racial or whatnot, gender identity, other diversities that they're working, can be working against them, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So we have to work harder, right? We just have to learn more. We have to think, and we said this earlier, we have to listen. And we don't do enough listening. And that's what I would want to, kind of say. We have to listen. And I would want to hear from you. So why is it different for you and your son or your child, right? And that's what I would want to learn about. And because I don't know, right? White girl, grew up in Pembroke, I don't know that. So I would want to listen to you and learn, why is it harder for your son? What can we do? What can we learn? And so I think that's the best way that I can, kind of respond to that. But it's real and it's there. It may not be in some people's sights because it's not, it's like, oh, well, our camp's great, everybody's happy here. Well, you're not serving your community. You're not really serving your community. And we need to reach out and, the way that you reach out really makes a difference too. If you're using the same methods to reach the same kids all the time, and you're missing in the boat, then you need to figure out how we can, reach who it is that is not represented in your camp and provide the opportunity, because everybody should be able to go to camp, right? I mean, camp and recreation are just awesome parts of childhood. It's how we define ourselves too, right? When, if I would ask you, hey, what do you like to do? More than likely, you're not going to tell me what you study in school. You're going to tell me like, oh, I love this activity. I love this sport. Oh, I met my best friend. We used to do this together. Chances are it's happened in what we choose to do, recreation, right? So that's why it's super important that we work to have, inclusion and recreation. There's systems set up in schools. Some work really well, some not so well. But there are systems set up in schools, and there should, we're putting more focus on work environments. I don't think we're doing as great a job as we could be. We could always be doing better, but we have to really be focused on what's super important is recreation and how we spend our time outside of work or school.
It's true. I mean, when you're saying like art recreation is everything, it's true, because just outside of the recreation part, I went to college, right? I have so much student loan debt, but I'll tell you what, I'm still friends with a lot of my college peers, right? Because the relationships matter. And like you're saying, is that camp and a lot of these, extracurriculum activities is what really molds your child in to be free from
Yes.
the classroom, because the classroom's not fun. And it's so funny because my son, when you would say, "What's your favorite classroom or class?" he would say gym. And in my head, I'm like, gym is technically not a class; it's a special. But then again, you're right; it is a class. And he would always say, "I want to go to gym." He would have been the happiest person in the world. Probably would have got all the best grades. If you left him in a space where he kind of felt confined to having to do what everybody else wanted him to do versus being free to do what he wanted to do, to release his energy the way they knew how. So,
and he liked it, and he was probably like good at it and loved it, and it didn't matter. Like, he just loved being there, and that's what I think camp and recreation does. We generally like to do that. It's what we choose to do, right? It's how you would choose to spend your time. Maybe it's horseback riding, or swimming, or whatever it is, but it's something that brings you joy. And kids with disabilities need that. They need to be able to participate and with their peers too, not always in a special or separate setting. Sometimes that's necessary, but I think more than not, we need to be pushing for more authentic inclusion.
what do you say to parents? This is one thing that I get a lot from parents, right?
Yeah.
A lot of parents are afraid to send their children into the recreational world and be part of a lot of these inclusive programs. What can you say to a parent who's afraid to send their child to a place like camp that maybe they've never done, in an inclusive camp, not necessarily a specialized camp? And we know that some specialized camps are necessary for some children or some youth that have, a different level of a disability. But for the children who are verbal and have the ability to socialize, what can you tell? And I know I'm kind of going off to a different question, because I get this all the time, and I'm like, I have to ask this. What can you tell a parent like myself if I say to you, you know what, Lisa, I don't know, I don't think that I can send my son to camp because I feel like he's going to be bullied, and I feel like he's not going to understand. How can you, make me feel like inclusion has to happen, right? And why it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, first I'd start by listening to you, and I believe you. I believe you when you say, I'm afraid my son will get bullied, or I'm concerned this will happen. And I want to hear that, and I want to listen to you, and I want to recognize that. And then I want to tell you, here's what I think we can, kind of work on together or think about together. So advice that I would give any family seeking to work with a camp or a rec program or whatnot is to, how you want to approach this is you're building a team, in essence. And there's a lot of little tricks and, strategies and whatnot, but it's number one about do your homework to make sure it's the right camp, it's the right model, right? We said there are some adaptive camps, there are some that have an integrated model, some are full authentic inclusion. Where is your child going to fit best, but then, why are you hesitant about inclusion, right? And a fully authentic inclusion. And what can we do to break down those barriers? Because on the other side, just as family members have their own, their own maybe misperceptions, maybe not, fears, and sometimes rightfully so. Well, my son went to camp A and camp B, and this happened. Okay, I get that. So all right, so let's talk about Camp C and let's start with a clean slate. How can we make this work? So something I say, and I say this in every training, it's one of my principles of inclusion. It's about focusing on what can go right instead of focusing on what could possibly go wrong. Right? Our natural instinct is to be like, well, this could happen, that could happen. What if this happens? What if that happens? Okay. So what I like to say to parents and staff too, because I tell the camp staff this, when you're approached with a new situation, a parent comes in and says, my son or daughter has blank or blank. Take a deep breath, pause, and take this approach. How can we make this work? Rather than, I'm going to start listing in my head all the things that are going to go wrong. We can't take that child because this. Well, what if this happens? Or what if that's well, what if it doesn't happen? That's basically it. So I would.
Fun happens, just that.
Oh my God. So what could happen? They could have fun. They could discover a new skill. Their disabilities could kind of go to the back and they could be known as an artist or, a swimmer or, equestrian or what they were meant to do and what they love. So first you start there with kind of it's a hard step, but focusing on what could go right and how we're going to make that happen. And it's all about building a team. I talk about when I work with, camp teams or rec teams, it's about building that rapport with a parent. And actually, as a camp or rec staff, you are joining that parent's team. That parent is the person who has all the answers to everything that is going to help this child to succeed. So it's not, us versus them. It's you're on that same team together. And you become part of their team because they're the ones who know what works. And they're the ones who bring their kids to OT and PT and maybe a therapist. And, they have special services and whatnot. They're the ones who have the knowledge all in their head, right? That's what moms do. Moms or dads or whomever, is a primary caretaker. And that's what we want to tap into because there's your answer to how this is going to work, basically. So it's a different approach because usually what has happened is like one bad story from 5 years ago when they're like, oh, well, this could happen again. Yeah, it could. But how about those 20 other kids who went through the program and had an amazing life-altering, changing experience? Oh, okay. So that's what I want to help both family members and the camp to understand, get on that focus, build that, as a parent, build that rapport, right? And then I always say, disclose, right? Just disclose, because having been on the other side, there were too many instances of, so a parent signing up the last minute in what we would call like drop and run, right? Bye, good luck. Hopefully they hold it together for the day, and it's like, oh no, just
you're in.
I know, it's like, bye, see ya. And then, what we used to call it like Tuesday tornadoes is by, Monday the kid would kind of hold it together. Then by Tuesday it'd be like, what the heck? And we didn't know because the parent was maybe afraid to disclose, like, oh, maybe if I don't tell them, maybe they'll, do well and I don't have to bring it up, this issue or that issue. It's always better to, number one, get your foot in the door early, right? Start early, start building that rapport. Don't sign your child up the week before camp, like sign them up months before so you can start working, you can share information, you can do things like, create a social story together or, learn more about their strategies. They can have more of an opportunity, have your child tour. There's all these little tricks that I think strategies that will help for the process to be more favorable for our camper, right, to have success. So that's what I want to do: disclose and work together with your camp team, and just know there's going to be bumps in the road, but it's how you deal with those bumps in the road, I suppose. And, I always say, like, there's no blame game here, where if there's an issue and something comes up at camp, we call the parent to look for their support. Hey, what would you do? Hey, this came up, rather than your son did this and this, and I told her we couldn't do it, right? Just kind of like take a deep breath and say, we're always looking to solve, any of these little bumps and hurdles are going to come up. So we want to solve it. Who's the person who can most likely help you solve that? You, mom, more than likely is going to be able to be part of that solution rather than like starting this like discourse, right? Just to be like, so you build this team and then you can really solve anything together. I know it sounds very Pollyanna, but it does work. I've seen it work,
But I'm happy you said that, because I know that I can be one of those parents, right? There's times that I'm like, do I disclose? Do I not disclose? If I disclose, is this going to hurt my child more than help him? But what I found, because my sons were at the Y, and I have to say that our experience has been amazing with the Y.
Good.
And I'm not sure if it was because of you, but I know that they've been amazing with us. I've always felt very comfortable just being me, my authentic self, because what you see is what you get, guys. Like, literally this.
Yeah.
And I'm also a very honest parent. I also can get crabby, right? Where I'm like, excuse me, we're going to have a conversation. But, I'm happy that you're sharing the part of why it's so important to see the parent and the partnership in the process of building inclusion and building a space where children can come and feel safe and have fun. So I love that you keep saying that, because, again, often it just feels like parents are just left out of all the conversations. Everyone's building every, plan and doing everything. And then they send it to us and you're like, was I part of this task force? Was I part of this conversation? Did you send me a survey? So it's awesome that you're saying this. Do you find that you're having more camps reach out to you to build an inclusion model? And if so, how's that going?
Yeah. So, there's generally two ways that somebody comes to me, and one could be, unfortunately, like an issue that came up, and then they like got to scramble and be like, how do I do this? And then they're, end up finding me or whatnot. The better way for this to happen is when an organization so YMCAs, for example, and I know this, for example, it's part of their mission, right? It's just part of who they are. For all is part of their, core, just competencies and what the Y is about. So it's likely that YMCAs are going to be more proactive and wanting to be doing that. In fact, I've worked with almost every Y in this area in Massachusetts, at least, and I've worked with their different programs. The Cable Colony, South Shore, what have you. So, anyways, I think that when an organization itself recognizes the importance of becoming more inclusive, that's when I'll be more effective in helping them, rather than coming in for a Band-Aid because an issue happened and like, oh, these staff need to learn this or what have you. That's okay. But I always like to say, I like to come up from the top and then work my way down, because my number one principle of inclusion is it takes organizational commitment. You can't just say, all right, well, we're this rec program, and uh, Sally and Joseph over here, you guys are going to run the special needs program, and just like, okay, bye-bye. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that, and it will never work like that. In fact, it'll actually backfire and do more damage. It has to be the whole organization committing to the entire every aspect of that organization, thinking more inclusively, from your CEO to your, maybe camp directors, middle management, boots on the ground staff, volunteers who come in. Every aspect you've got to be thinking about. From how is your publications and your wording on your anything that goes out, marketing or social media or whatnot. Are you representing all types of diversity in your, when you have pictures, and you don't just have pictures of kids with disabilities to represent your, adaptive programs, that you have it in your general brochure because they're just your members, right? They're not always like in this group over here and the rest of us over here. It's everybody together. So, there's organizational commitment is how it's always going to work better. When we're coming in, because there's certain things that, program directors or leadership teams need to be thinking about that's way different than what I would be teaching a camp counselor, and then how do you implement it comes more in that middle range. Every piece of that puzzle is so important. So when an organization realizes that it's worth it to invest and when I say invest, I'm not even talking money, just invest in just being more intentional of our practices, right? That's how it's going to work best. And yes, there are more and more. I think, there will probably still be those cases where something happened or an issue or whatnot, and then they need to find an inclusion instructor to come in or whatnot. But more and more, I find that organizations as a whole are seeking to be more intentional in their work. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it could just be that I'm getting out there more too. There's not a lot of people doing what I'm doing. Yep. There's not a whole, this is new, what I'm doing. I talk to people and they're like, what? I never heard of that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, and that's why I got into it, because it's not a lot of people doing this. Nobody is, but it's so valuable and so important. So very, very important.
But you hit on a few things that I'm like, this can work in a school district too, right?
Mhm.
Because as a person who's worked in a public school system before to then becoming a parent, I'm like, dude, there's a huge disconnect between the school district from administration down all the way to how special education functions. And like you said, our students that are in specialized programs should not be over here while all the other students are over here. And then we're trying to figure out why some of our students in specialized programs are still, have barriers in how they socialize.
Yeah.
And you can't have all the special education students on one corridor away from all their peers, and you're wondering why you even have students in an inclusion that don't know what it is to know someone in their community who's nonverbal, and what does that mean, right? So I love that you said that, because that's one of the biggest things that I fight for all the time. I'm always like, dude, we have to figure something out. Like, there is a huge disconnect. And like you said, it starts all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom, because I even see, our maintenance department, our maintenance men and women that are working in our school district, our lunch mothers and lunch fathers who play an amazing role in identifying inclusion.
Yep, absolutely. Every single person who touches it into your organization, every single person should understand what inclusion means for your organization. That's what I say. So if I walk in, I should go to any YMCA or town rec program or whatever, and I should walk in the door and say, hello, my son or my daughter has Down syndrome or autism or what have you, and they would like to be part of your camp program. And anybody who I interface with should be able to say, yes, we're an inclusive program. And that's when inclusion is working well, right? Rather than like, I don't know, I don't think we take kids like this. Like,
camp director, and you're just I don't know. Like, you know what? I don't even think I'm going to register here, because if you can't answer that to me, I don't even want to speak to your camp director after this.
Exactly. I mean, and
the side eye, like,
that's the importance, and as like a former inclusion, staff, that your word and everything that you've built up sits on the shoulder of that person who works 2 hours a week at the front desk on a Saturday afternoon. Because if they don't know you're inclusive and they give the wrong information, or God forbid to do something, say something, that's negative, then you've just lost all your work. It's just gone down the tubes. So that's why it's important. It's the language that we use. It's the representation that we have. It's the way, even think about this. And I say this to camps too. Great. So you're inclusive. And this is more for like a leadership level. This is one thing I would pose to them. How many of your camp employees have disabilities?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So do you see, that also should be a representation of your community. And I can help you with that too, right? We can start thinking about that. But mostly we think of like, oh, sure. Like I get back to that thing called proximity, right? It's not just about proximity. Oh, well, we have those group homes come in all the time. That's not, that's part of inclusion. It's not fully inclusion. Are you hiring a diverse workforce? Right. And because there's going to be representation, there'll be language that's used that is just more inclusive in its nature. So that's something that we want to be thinking about too. Right. And if you start these young campers down here and your whole staff is kind of thinking this way, guess what? Those kids are going to grow up to be teens that understand inclusion. Guess who those teens are going to be? They're going to go out into the workforce, and maybe they'll hire people, or maybe there'll be a person with a disability who has confidence to now start their own company, or maybe they will have their own, company, or be in HR, and they'll know like, oh, sure, of course I can hire somebody with a disability. It does it, right? They'll know that it works because they had seen it down in the camp level. That's why it's so important not to have these kids over here and these kids over here, because that's always, they're like the mystery, like, what's a kid? Oh, you can be nonverbal and still be. Those are the things that should just be part of us all living together, right? To learn and live together, have lunch together, go to the basketball games together, all of that, every part of it, right? Make a friend, which is a huge, huge, huge thing of mine right now. I actually just finished, and be out in about a month, writing a book for the Arc of Massachusetts, and it's called Pathways to Friendship. It is about how we as community organizations, rec programs, YMCAs, churches, libraries, so on and so forth, what we can be doing to create that culture of inclusion that then develops that the chances for a person with and without disabilities to actually meet and become friends because of a mutual interest. That's what's important. The mutual interest. Oh, you like robotics too, and I do. Or, oh, did you read that book? Oh, I'm in this book club. Joe, you want to join my book club? And it's about liking the book, or going fishing, or going whatever it is, being in a drama production together. That's what it's about. It's not about a person's disability. It's about their art, or their love, or their enrichment, or whatever. What is it? What is the value that they bring to the table, right? And what makes them shine? And often it's those recreation things that make somebody shine. And when we can focus on that, you have more of a chance of two people connecting and having a friendship, right? And friends are important. Authentic friends are really important. And that's part of what recreation can offer as well.
So I think that you've touched upon a few of these things. But what do you find to be some of the barriers that, and I think that you've said it a few times already, that a lot of camp recreation organizations may struggle in, bringing the inclusion model in.
Yeah.
What do you see are some of those barriers?
I think, the number one barrier is misinformed, uneducated, stigma, right? That's going to be the biggest barrier. Usually that's generally it, right? Just that we don't know how, or our staff aren't trained. Fear. Fear is one of the biggest barriers too. Fear of litigation, fear of the cost, fear of like, we're not equipped or we're not trained. And if they could just understand and learn that, if you make the efforts to become more inclusive, yeah, everything may not be perfect, but you're less likely to have a litigation against you because you've taken the steps too, and you're setting up a good rapport with families so that there isn't going to be this fight and this, like, well, I'm going to sue you because my kid, what have you. When you think more inclusively, you are like, oh, we'll make this work, rather than no, we can't, and then there's a lawsuit, right? So when you open up to it, you've taken that out of the formula. The cost, inclusion is proven to be more cost effective and actually a benefit for an organization than not being about being exclusive, right? That is very misunderstood. But when you actually engage in authentic inclusion across the board, school systems too, I wish they would recognize this, it actually saves more money than one-to-oneing a kid, which does nothing for the child, like in terms of social engagement and this and that. In more cases, kids are able to be in with their typical peers in a traditional camp, and it saves a lot of money because there's so many other benefits, and that's a whole other training. And I think not equipped, so call me, I'll give you a training. We'll figure out what do you need, and we'll figure this out. How do you want, there's a series of strategies that I teach. How do you start implementing these into your culture? And you know what? Big secret here, the strategies that I teach, they're good for all kids. They're good for all kids. So it's not, you no longer have to be like, everybody with autism, come over here. We're going to do our visual schedule. No, use a visual schedule for everybody, because you know what? All kids are going to benefit from that. All learners. And we don't all go around with a label on our head. And maybe some kids, parents don't disclose. And maybe they're just kind of going under the radar here. But all of a sudden you start using inclusion strategies and they're coming out of their shells, right? And they're like engaging and they're getting more out of camp because you're using inclusion strategies. So it's all, makes sense. So I think when we start tackling the fears and the stigma, and the only way to combat stigma is education. It's teaching that, inclusion works. It works. And when it's done well, and when an organization commits, it's all I've seen it happen. I've seen it only work, when an organization commits to it. And when you have that top down, that I talked about earlier, it's not going to work if you're just like, well, we just hired this one person, she's going to take care of every, whatever. It's not going to work that way. That's just a Band-Aid. It's not changing your organizational views. And I think once they start seeing some benefits too, that helps for a program to know, okay, we're headed in the right direction. When you start seeing concrete benefits, like, staff are happier because now they're not like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this kid. Well, have a training and teach them. Maybe we're not all born with these thoughts of how to work with a kid like that. Oh, now I learned these strategies and it works for, these kids and these kids and these kids. Oh, and I used it at home too. And it really, wow, the way I'm thinking now, it's really working in all aspects of my life. It's like this light goes on, and it's pretty powerful, when benefits start being recognized.
I see. I'm not sure if this is a question that pertains to you, but I know Laura wants to know, how do you contact and possibly work with your organization or company? Do you take insurance? I don't know if you want to let her know.
Yeah, sure, Laura. Thank you. So I would work with an organization, so like a YMCA and whatnot. And so I would sometimes parents make a recommendation, and that's part of some of the trainings that I do for families too, is that if you hit a brick road, you hit this brick wall and you're struggling, go in and talk to the director or what have you, and just have a genuine, good, even-keeled conversation and just say, do you know that inclusion training is available? And maybe they're not even aware that this is something, right? And then I can give you the name. So sometimes I get connected through that way, and that's more in a positive way, like, let's do this together. And then, so I do work with the organization. As far as insurance, I don't, because I'm a consultant that's hired by the organization.
No, ladies and gentlemen, she is the consultant.
The consultant, not just a consultant, but no, I'm not, I'm hired to go in usually for the organization and teach the organization. Now, I've also, but it's on different types of programs. I've worked with ARCs and agencies that support people with disabilities, and I've worked on a couple projects kind of from that lens, but it's a little different. So not necessarily like I'll sit and I'll take a call from any parent anytime and just listen, just to learn and maybe give advice. But I'm not necessarily like, would a parent hire me to come in and, in that role? Although I'm open to, exploring anything. More, it's just like, let's listen, we'll figure this out. Yeah. I really believe that. I believe if you just listen, we can figure out a lot together, right?
Yep. So Laura, we have to push her into our school districts. We have to push her towards the organizations in our community that offer recreational services for our babies. So I know it's going into the hour. So this is all you, Lisa. Tell us where to find you, how to contact you, and if you have any upcoming forums or
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, I gotta think about that. Okay, so number one, jump on my website, www.mergeconsulting.org, and that should be scrolling across the bottom as well. So if you jump on there, number one, sign up for my monthly newsletter. I only do it once a month. I'm not going to flood you because I don't have time to do anything else. So sign up for that because you get a feel of what's going on, right? And maybe I might share about a certain program I'm working with, and you're like, oh wow, that's a great idea, or could you do that for our church or whatever, right? So start there. And then, I always say, look at the training tab and you get a sense of the type of work or what are my messages, because that's where you might direct somebody. So say you go back and you're trying to work with your rec program, but they're like, oh, we don't know how to do this or whatnot. You would probably refer them like, hey, check out this website, go on the training, tab and check out what she has available. Because sometimes just reading a title of something like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're going through, so this would be perfect, and then connect with me there. So mostly Facebook, I do a daily post, kind of connect, like, share. If you think it's something that I'm offering out there is of interest, it's good to keep my numbers up or whatnot. So I'm on Facebook and also Instagram, and professionally on LinkedIn as well. My email's there, so if somebody wants to shoot me an email, give me a phone call, just shoot me an email and say, hey, when can we talk? And I always want to listen, because what, I've said this from my career, from the early days at New England Village, when I learned how to listen to the parents, because I was like 17, 18 years old, and maybe at first I didn't. I'd be like, oh, that Mrs. So-and-so is, such a whatever. And, I did that for a little bit, but then something dawned on me, and I have to say, I think it was probably around the time when my daughter was born, and I like things just so with her, right? Wanted her fingernails clipped, her hair done in a certain way, and I remember telling a sitter something like, "Oh, can you make sure her pajamas, whatever it was?" But it dawned on me that, what? That's the same thing that Mrs. So-and-so was asking for me to do for her son, and it just opened my eyes to think like, that's somebody's son or daughter or brother or sister. I need to listen a little bit more. And I learned to listen a lot more. And it's actually what drives me. I think that, I get excited about this stuff because I see when it works well, and when a parent is, almost in tears because their son, who's 11 years old, never been invited to a birthday party, got his first birthday party invitation at camp, and was, teary because that was so exciting. And that wouldn't have happened if we didn't open up our camp to be more inclusive. So that's those are the stories that drive me and just make me so passionate about what I do, you know, because I just feel like we can do better in our communities. And you know what? All you parents of kids with disabilities, you're freaking tired. You know? So like, I'll take the lead on this. I got your back. Like I'll do some of this heavy lifting for you because I can, and our communities deserve better. I've seen it work. I've seen staff who have been like, had aha moments that feel awesome. I know that this works. So, you know, I just appreciate being able to share that here tonight.
All right.
Yeah.
We have to push her in our community. So this is exciting. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This has been such a humbling conversation, and because inclusion is really big, and you know, I hope that parents listen, that we have people out here that are working with organizations in our communities to really support the efforts of being inclusive and having that opportunities to bring our kids to the community and have them be part of our community and not be afraid of this, right? Because I think that a lot of us are, as parents, we are afraid, but let's not be afraid. If we have someone like Lisa on our team willing to fight for why inclusion is important, then, you know, we're heading in the right direction. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We're a team, right? We're just going to make this work. And that's why I know it can work and together, right? With our WISE, with our rec programs, with our community programs and our family members and agencies that support them and everybody together. We just have to be focused and committed on this now more than ever, right? Now more than ever.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good night. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Yeah.
See you later.
Autism sprinter. Think equity. Yeah. It's time to give the power back to the people. We're fighting to make our beliefs equal. Look at the failed policies and how they treat you. We got strength, yeah, we're far from feeble. This is for anyone with autism or a disability. Time to unite, show them how strong our will can be. Move readily, we're promoting equity. A non-profit platform, that's the recipe. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. Now throw your hands up, we finally got a winner. Think equity with Autism Sprinter. It's time to make a change. It's time to stand up for what we believe in. Equality and equity across the board. No matter your race, nation, or creed, disability, or your needs. It gotta be equal. It gotta be right.